Hey guys, this is Paul, and I've been using the iPhone 11 Pro for about the past 6 months or so until I picked up the iPhone SE. And the main question that I wanted to answer is whether or not the 11 Pro is worth the $600 more that it's going to cost you over the iPhone SE. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I loved my iPhone 7 that I had since its release date back in 2016. But it was just finally time for it to go. It still technically worked, but some moisture got in the camera lens that caused blurry photos, and the battery life got so bad, so I decided to sell it before it totally died out on me. So at that point, I thought I would splurge a little bit and treat myself to the best iPhone that Apple has to offer, the iPhone 11 Pro. So I used the 11 Pro for quite a while, and it's an amazing phone in my opinion. I love the new matte sort of frosted finish. The battery life is really solid. The display looks fantastic, although I'm still not a fan of the notch. And the triple camera setup has you covered for pretty much any photo you take with a smartphone. And then the new SE was released, and it caught my attention because it almost has the same body as the iPhone 7 that I loved so much. It's actually the exact same body as the iPhone 8, so it has the IP67 water and dust resistance and wireless charging, which I didn't have on the 7. But it was updated with the same chip from the new iPhone 11 and 11 Pro, the A13 Bionic, which allows portrait mode on both the front and back cameras, and it makes for just a very quick and fluid experience all around. So when I downgraded from the 11 Pro to the SE, the thing that I immediately noticed most was the display. Obviously, it's not as big as the 11 Pro because it still has that forehead and chin on the top and bottom, but it's also not quite as sharp as you'd want it to be. It's the same display from the iPhone 8, so it's 4.7 inches with a resolution of 1334 by 750, giving it a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. And not having at least a 1080p display on a smartphone in 2020 does make this feel like a dated phone. I also noticed it's slightly on the magenta side in terms of colors, and it doesn't get quite as bright as the 11 Pro, so if you're using it in direct sunlight, you might notice that difference. But it's not a bad display by any means. The colors are still pretty accurate, and it is sharp enough for the average user, but it's still 3 years old, and it would have been nice to see a brighter, updated 1080p display on this phone. Another big difference I noticed with the SE was reverting back from Face ID to Touch ID with the home button. I loved Touch ID on my 7, and I was so reluctant to use Face ID. I was really not a fan when it first came out on the iPhone 10, but I have to say that it's gotten much better in the past couple of years, and on the 11 Pro, it's super fast, and now I'd say I like it about equally to Touch ID. But of course, with wearing a face mask now anytime I'm not home, Face ID does not work with that, so for the time being, Touch ID is the better option. I really think an ideal solution would be Face ID as the primary way of unlocking the phone with maybe a touch sensor on the back. I think that would be super cool. And as far as camera goes, the 11 Pro has it all. It has the standard lens, an ultra-wide lens, and a telephoto lens. And of course, with the SE, you just have the one standard lens. I found that with the 11 Pro, I would use the ultra-wide and the standard lens pretty frequently, but I would almost never use the telephoto lens. So while it would have been nice to have an ultra-wide on the SE, the 12 megapixel camera that it does have still takes some very solid, sort of typical iPhone looking pictures. It has good colors with great dynamic range, although it does not have the low light mode that's available on the 11 and 11 Pro. Performance-wise, the SE is fantastic, and I guess that's what you would expect if you have the same A13 Bionic chip from the 11 and 11 Pro and 3 gigabytes of RAM powering a less than 1080p display. But yeah, it's super smooth, and if you get this phone, you won't have to worry about performance for years to come. This thing would easily last you 3-4 plus years, which can't be said for many other $400 smartphones. The battery life is also really solid. I recently had a full day of travel, which is really the best test for battery. I was watching movies, playing music, and using my phone almost all day, And after about 4.5 hours of screen on time, the SE was at 10% battery, which is pretty impressive. So this thing should definitely get the average user through at least a full day of use. And there's not really too much left to say because at the end of the day, the SE is really just an iPhone 8 with updated internals. So is it worth the downgrade from the 11 Pro to the SE to save $600? And for me, I think I actually will be downgrading. The two things I'll miss most are the wide-angle camera and the display, but there are also things I like about the SE, like Touch ID, at least for now with masks, that's much more convenient, and the slightly smaller form factor is really refreshing to see in a world of massive phones. Okay, so here's my sort of ideal iPhone. I would want it to be the size of the iPhone SE, so it's nice and pocketable, with the edge-to-edge display of the iPhone 11 Pro. I would want the ultra-wide camera and the standard camera. The telephoto I don't really care so much about. And I would want it to be less than $700. And guess what? That's exactly what we're expecting to see with the new base model iPhone 12. It's supposed to have a 5.4 edge-to-edge display, which should give it a very similar form factor to the SE. It's rumored to have a standard and an ultra-wide lens with the telephoto reserved for the larger models. And if it follows in the footsteps of the iPhone 11, it should start at $700. This would be the absolutely perfect phone in my opinion, so I can't wait for it to be released later this year. But until then, I think I'll stick with the SE. It's a bare bones yet reliable phone, and at $400, I think it offers a really great value for someone looking for a cheaper iPhone. Anyways, if you like this video, thumbs up always help. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next video.